Greetings, dear friends, thank you so much for joining us. It's never a good idea to pre-order any game, because the developers are naturally interested in squeezing the last bit of money out of you. They want you to fall for some advertising and make an impulse purchase and think, well, I want to support these guys, especially if it's a studio you know, like Arcane for Dishonored, or DICE for Battlefield, or From Software for the great Dark Souls series. But, as it turns out, things can go wrong. For this year alone there have already been several failed releases, the developers who then came out and tearfully apologized. The creators of Forspoken released a game that was advertised as if it was a new Skyrim, but then it turned out that the sales didn't reach the target figures, the studio was disbanded and the guys were transferred to other places. Star Wars Jedi: Fallen Order could have been a good game too, if the developers hadn't bothered to optimize it both on PC and consoles. The game was bloated, but due to the poor technical state, the developers had to apologize as well. However, the developers at least released a patch that allowed it to play normally on PC, but there are still problems and they keep releasing updates. In contrast, the developers of The Last of Us Part 2 released a game on PC that spent hours compiling shaders and running at 30 frames per second on RTX 4090. First the developers released one patch, then a second patch, but the situation hardly changed at all. 2 months later they released another patch. The guys from Digital Foundry released an analysis of the updated version, and it turned out that they fixed a bit, but the performance still leaves much to be desired. But let's hope that in the end this company Sony, which is the responsible publisher in the world of game creation. In May, the baton of apologies and failures was picked up by Arcane, the creators of the Dishonored and Prey 2017 trilogy. Specialists Immersive Sim, the creators of Deathloop, a controversial, but nevertheless game that found its audience, released a project called Redfall or Redfall, which to me is more appropriate for this garbage. However, this project was broken at all levels, received a lot of criticism from players, and average scores from online publications. The developers went out and simply ignored the audience, posting a picture with the traditional apology after the fiasco. It would seem that the plan to apologize for the failures of the month is done, enough, but no, immediately ran up the developers of Gollum. Who released? Well, it's hard to call it a game. It's a crookedly stitched set of the most primitive and squishy elements. Even the top internet broke down, giving the game only a 36-point average on Metacritic. All in all, there was a catastrophic failure, and Dialectic Studios looked at fashion trends and published a letter of apology. Only this time the public was not moved, the guys did not choose to understand and forgive. The guys remembered how many apology letters there had been lately. And in the end it all turned into a flash mob, that is, people started remembering already in Cyberpunk and Halo Infinite, Star Wars Battlefront 2 and a letter of apology from the developers of Stalker 2. By the way, Stalker 2 has already been released. If you're not in the know, according to the leak, there's kind of an encrypted build at the moment, at the time the video was created. What happens next? We'll find out. GTA: The Trilogy. The developers of Crossfire X, that Xbox exclusive, have also apologized. Of course, the developers of Battlefield 2042 also apologized. There is still such a game, as it turns out, is even in development not so long ago. 3 times in a row the creators of War Thunder apologized in this topic. By the way, I am now deeply researching and gathering information from people who are familiar with the work of Gaijin. I'm interested to understand this company and its attitude towards the audience. The good thing is that so many emails have already come in, so many layouts of who she used to cheat about bots and how the game has a unique ability. If a person doesn't log into the game for a long time, they get a notification in the mail, you're in the game. Thank you for that. And people say, well, I haven't logged into the game. Hello, or was I hacked? No, I don't think I was hacked. Just somehow the developers are using a different account instead of a bot. Anyway, I'm researching that question now. But the developers of War Thunder apologized at least 3 times, the developers of Gollum and everyone else apologized only once each. There is still room for improvement. But because the company failures not only for this year has already accumulated enough that users began to mock them, frankly. Guys, on the other hand, you have a flash mob, you started to remember these letters of apology. And we have another flash mob, we're going to support each other on Twitter. All of a sudden, a club of loser developers has formed. You could call it a public trash club, not anonymous. Because it wasn't somewhere out there in closed chats, in some inter-society. No, public, because other developers decided to support the creators of Gollum and started talking about what bad games they were working on, as they write the creators of failed games console other developers by showing their crooked games and their awesome passages. Why are they awesome? And because there's not a fraction of regret in them, just words of encouragement. Like, we had a good time, it was a useful lesson. We were cool and fun, I warmly recall those times. It's as if the developers didn't understand that once they release some terrible product that causes maximum disappointment to the target audience, the audience that is used to trust this studio, that loves this franchise, it's better to shut your mouth and not to shine, because that way you cause only mockery and criticism. Even more irritation is caused not only by the players, but also by the investors. A development company has to consider both sides. On the one hand, you have players to whom you have to make a good game. It may be an amateur game, of course, but it has to be good. It has to have a good game design. On the other side are the investors. Investors gave you money to make a good game. The investor is not interested in you releasing garbage that will be watered down with feces later. An investor is not interested in paying for some developer's experience. The investor is interested in investing money. The studio creates a quality product that sells well and gets positive feedback. The investor gets money, of course, because creating a game is not an advanced training course, where, by the way, participants pay money. Here you get money, and you raise your qualifications. What's important here, of course, is that mistakes are part of the journey. There's no experience without mistakes, everyone understands that, and it's logical. There's no such thing that all games can be good. The make only good games format statement is inherently stupid. No one demands that the industry make only good games. Alas, that's impossible. There can be failures, there can be bad products. As for this flash mob, it looks kind of weird to me. The developers got together and said, well, we did some shit, okay. You know what was missing? To, so to speak, get a check mark, publish a game evaluation from a Metacritic, which they did, and this kind of a postscript. But nevertheless, we, or there are company, and more SOSO suckers, and next to the game sales, or in brackets, if the game sales are good, and investors were generally, well, satisfied. Here's the thing to do, so to speak, the final, because just the guys got together. Financial success. The project was. Nevertheless, thanks to the marketers, thanks to the managers, who pulled this game into the black after all. Yay! So, the developer of Troll and I is an unbelievable blight that has earned reviews from top internet stars. It's worth considering, from journalists who gave the game a 27 out of 100, it's even worse than Gollum if anything. Let's turn this into a trend.
This was my first game that I worked on from start to finish. A team of talented people tried to make something very ambitious, but for various reasons it didn't work out. However, by working on this game, I was able to become a gameplay animator.
Great, we're happy for you. A fellow who was involved in Aliens, Colonial Marines, famously rated 43 out of 100 on Metacritic.
Colleagues quote my tweet, "Tell me about your lowest rated game and what you like about it. Like it, add selfies if you want." Yes, technically worked on this one a little bit. It was a hell of a lot of fun developing a game based on someone else's, even considering how it turned out in the end.
But it was more fun for the players who were deceived by Gearbox, which showed videos that did not correspond. The real game Aliens, Colonial Marines is one of the iconic cheats of the game. Industry, it's a scandal, it's a disgusting game on the promising. Developer All Stars Karate with a rating of 46 out of 100.
I learned a lot and had a good time trying to put out something fun for kids with a small team. Nobody wants to make a bad game, but it's a tough business.
One of the developers of The Crew, which came out SOSO, 61 out of 100.
The Crew came out SOSO, but all of my colleagues were wonderful and talented people. Sometimes things just don't work out the way you want them to, and that's the norm.
If you are involved in the development of a project and you see that it is not going in the direction you wanted, you, as a responsible citizen, should not remain silent. It is advisable to raise questions and ask them of the responsible decision-makers. The entire team of talented and wonderful people should do everything possible to turn in the right direction and not to turn the product into a disaster. But all this company of talented people sat and squeezed the gas pedal because they liked everything. In the end, The Crew has not become a complete disappointment to those who played it. I have with this game the same relationship as with the series of games Test Drive, cool to drive and admire the beauty along the roads, but no more. APB Reloaded is a failed session. GTA Online junkie, so to speak. It got a score of 58 out of 100.
But I'm still proud of my work. Nobody wants to put out a bad game. There are thousands of reasons why something can go wrong, and sometimes that's something no one can control. All you can do is learn from it and move on.
The developer Gotham City Imposter is also a sessional with characters from the DC universe.
Gotham City Imposter was a complete mess with a lot of bad decisions made by the management. Total mismatch of gameplay and IP. I still enjoyed working on the game with a small team. Daily playtests kept our morale up, we were brainstorming and different quirky. Anyway, yeah, that's how it turned out.
Suddenly it turns out that the game, which has been in development for several years, was actually assembled in almost 15 months. Information that many news sites dug up at one time is confirmed. That's why it was in such a state.
I learned a lot after that project. We knew the game wasn't ready because it was actually done in 15 months. And that was unheard of for a game on the scale of Anthem 2. It could have been great.
How could it become great with developers like that? We learned our lesson. We learned a lot, we did. You saw that you were doing well, but you were getting paid, and you didn't really care about the result, for one simple reason: the people in charge who would get their heads kicked, and if anything, it wasn't you, it was them, the game designers, game directors, exactly the people who led the company in the wrong direction, who led this very project into a dead end, and in the end all this led to the fact that it was hastily assembled for 15 months, simply because Electronic Arts was no longer able to tolerate and pull this project. Come to think of it, 8 years of dragging ballast in the form of BioWare, hundreds of millions of dollars were probably thrown into this very Anthem. This, by the way, is the clearest classic example of when there was a need for a little more effective management, because at that time Electronic Arts didn't really control BioWare, and being in such a creative freedom, BioWare company suffered from bullshit. For a year they couldn't make any decisions to get this project out of production hell. And another fellow who worked on Battlefield 2042 says that the developers understood everything, but they released the game in that state, because they had to meet the deadline. This game had many iterations, but the deadline never changed. It never had a chance to be great right away at release. I'm proud of the effort I put into making sure this game has full crossplay and progression. These online systems will serve future games well. You're good, you're good. Crossplay exists, but that doesn't negate the fact that the development team treated the game design and level design with a sleeved hand. The game had these major problems: people were caught in empty open spaces, faced with a terrible imbalance in techniques. people wanted to play Battlefield and ended up with some cheesy version of Call of Duty where instead of a good design with lots of shelters you just have a field and run through that field. I hope that you won't get a sniper or a tank will suddenly fall from the sky on you, because there were such weird bugs. And so to speak, enjoy. And so this flash mob passed, and, naturally, it did not meet with much understanding among players, because players again and again are being handed unfinished games of disgusting quality, and say buy and promote these games through false trailers, promises and pre-orders. You know we can be trusted, right? Here's a trailer for you. By the way, not a bad story trailer recently, which I even liked better. I didn't like it. So to speak, I was waiting for this game. People are looking at it. Okay, you guys have fun, and you know, we didn't have much fun. We didn't have a lot of fun paying money for an unfinished product and launching a disgusting game and getting negative vibes from it. We're very happy that you learned something. But you learn for our money, and that's very, very ugly from the player's point of view. Many of these players also suddenly collect on these games, and game developers lately appear as some sort of god elected, the future of all planet Earth, the very people who will send us to a Mass Effect level future. I hope that there will be Shepard. I hope there will be Shepard, who will be able to put Reapers on a bottle. But send us to this future, IT people. I basically understand and share the comments when people start coming up with all sorts of analogies with food, houses, machinery, etc. Basically anything. Imagine being handed an unfinished, undercooked product and being told, pay up. Yes, today. Yes, and you'll get it tomorrow. There are analogies for movies, too. In today's movies from Disney, the quality of the computer graphics has dropped off a lot, but it's there. There's finished computer graphics, there's no plugs, there's sound, there's all the effects where they should be. It may not all work perfectly, but it works, not like you go to the theater, you're shown half the scenes, and at the end of the show there's a letter on the screen apologizing that the developers will fix everything for the digital release of the movie. Where do all these problems with game development come from, when people clearly see that a project turns out badly, but nevertheless don't continue to run it? It's all about management, or rather, the lack of a management culture. That is, management must be clear, with an understanding of when you get a budget for your project, in what stages what must be done, when this team is released, when this team intercepts, what things can be conducted simultaneously. It has to be a clear management, and that, as we see it, is not there. At every stage it turns out that something can go wrong, and the project is restarted, and the timeline doesn't change. And why? And because before you start a project, you have to design, you have to at least understand what kind of report you want to do, and then you have to test that idea against a gray background with dice to see if it's fun for you to play with. And then when you're convinced that the gameplay works, that the level design will be just right and not different, you need to put it into production. But with projects like that, for which the developers had to eventually apologize, you get the feeling that they came up with ideas along the way, tried to implement them, saw that something didn't work, and ended up rolling it back. Then they would strain the programmers because, oh, I want to add this, and let's add that. Oh, we've launched an alpha test, the players fucked something up, let's try to redo something before the release. 3 months. How about we fix the bugs? Yes, not enough. In the meantime, let's release as they are releasing. There are huge problems with the culture of development, and that, in turn, is because there are so many talented, wonderful, hardworking, very talented people who don't understand what they're doing, or even if they understand what it's all about. Here, when I played Gollum, I didn't understand how the game came to be, how it was approved. You start playing it and after 10 minutes you get bored, after 20 minutes you realize that nothing will change, after 30 minutes you start howling and climbing the wall, because it's impossible to do that. At the same time I remember these old developer diaries which told how we made Half-Life. When Valve was making it, we went through each level hundreds of times to see if it was interesting, if it was really interesting. Now it's time to add some elements, a puzzle, a skirmish, or on the contrary, it's necessary to reduce this run down the corridor. Everything was done to make it interesting for the player. Why? Have we, most importantly, done our job? A letter of apology, please. Bad projects exist and will continue to exist. Development processes are not a perfect system, it is a creative process that is inextricably linked to chaos. Chaos is a natural part of that process, because creativity is inextricably tied to experimentation and trying to put things together on short notice. The modern game industry, with its social media, all this confession of working on shit, and it's been great. You find your place, sell your work, don't be afraid to shit and be proud of it. But to me it looks weird. You made a serious mistake, and you're trying to analyze it and move on. If you look for the positives of this flash mob, it might actually be a pretty good signal to effective management. You participated in a bad project, yes, but it probably allowed you to get your hands on it. Well, man, be proud, especially publicly, of what you've done. Excuse me, that's a spit in the direction of the people who paid your salary, and in the direction of the people who were unlucky enough to buy your game. And so as a final thought. Many times in the future I will say, do not pre-order under any circumstances, because developers and publishers aim to extract money from you in any way, by deception, false expectations, in order to awaken in you an impulsive desire to buy. Don't pre-order, regardless of the developer's name or the posh projects behind it. Don't support this practice because it's what leads to these results. Developers think it's okay and the money has already gone to them. Of course, the PC has its own system to punish such developers. But this system exists only on Steam and is called refunds. You can play the game for 2 hours and then say it's boring or doesn't meet expectations and request a refund. Steam gives you a refund, which is very important. Unfortunately, other platforms like Sony or Xbox don't offer such an easy refund system. It is the "I want a refund" button without too much dancing around and communicating with support that should be a lesson for many companies. I completely agree with the refund system in Steam, which of course should have certain rules and limitations, but it should be the basis for the whole industry. It's certainly a dream, but there shouldn't be a situation where people are forced to communicate with support if a project is broken, like Cyberpunk 2077 or Fallout 76, then the refund system should automatically expand and provide better terms for player refunds. But unfortunately, Sony is launching a special page on the PS Store for people to issue Cyberpunk 2077 refunds. But this is ridiculous and silly, and such actions encourage such releases as well as the pre-order system. Players, of course, shouldn't have to pre-order. Here's another huge hello to Denuvo, which on the PC prides itself on saving launch sales of games and telling publishers, "We're going to help you bait the suckers." They hope that the game won't be available on torrents and people will buy it based on reviews, trailers and stuff. What's interesting about this semester? What led to this developer flash mob? What events? I think the important developments this year were the following. The top internet started to break, games, even with great PR and budgets, started to get average scores, like Forspoken, Redfall, and the PC version of Last of Us Part 1, and in the case of Gollum, the top internet finally broke as well, as the $60 base and $70 premium edition got scores below 40 out of 100 respectively on Metacritic. Even reviewers are finding it hard to find games of high quality or with good technical execution. Recently, voices from members of the press started to come out when a Digital Foundry staff member stated that Star Wars Jedi Survivor could not be sold on PC. I also saw information from Tom Henderson, who is an industry insider. He noted that the letter of apology from the developers was part of the promotional cycle for the game, and now such talk has arisen. Negativity has reached a certain level and exploded, and I think that's important in the gaming industry. Scandals and negative reactions from gamers matter. These toxic elements from the lower internet are causing fury among gamers. It's important to understand that negativity doesn't have an immediate effect, It accumulates over time, similar to the loot box scandal, and now we see scandals over the poor quality of many games. The negativity accumulates and explodes, and then, for a while, publishers may think twice. Over time, however, the negativity will subside. There is no permanent effect of companies wavering under the influence of criticism here. I think bad games will continue to come out, but I would like to believe that some companies and developers will pay attention to this situation and wonder if they want to participate in such scandals or associate their games with failure. Even if a game fails financially, but gets high ratings and a strong fan base, it becomes a cause for pride on Twitter. And that's it for today. Thank you very much for your attention.